This episode on Pop Pedagogy.
Is Janine Teagues a good teacher?
It's hilarious.
Really interesting in terms of thinking about culturally responsive teaching and how we teach controversial or difficult subjects.
She has so much enthusiasm, passion, curiosity, and desire for connection with her peers and her students.
Is technology the best solution?
Class dismissed.
Remember how scary your first days at school were, so I'd like you to be especially nice to Matilda.
Captain, my captain. Sit down, Mr. Anderson.
Are you going to teach us anything, or are we just going to sit here?
Welcome to Pop Pedagogy.
Hi, Melissa.
Hey, Nichole. How's it going?
It's going. It's been a long weekend, so that's been nice. I've been doing some home improvement projects and trying to pick out paint colors to change the color in my bedroom. So that's been fun. How about you?
That's so cool. Yeah, I've had a really nice weekend. I went to a coffee roasting workshop, so that was really cool. Spent almost 4
I have to
hours.
ask you about that later
coffee
because I feel like that's related to a project that you have in mind for your future.
For sure. But yeah, it's been nice. And I'm so happy to be recording about this episode because, oh my gosh, I love that it was so light compared to all the recent media that we've been watching.
I needed it. I needed it so bad. Okay, yeah. Well, what are you snacking on today?
Nothing. Literally nothing. I just had some coffee in the morning and that's it. It's Monday,
some chips and salsa, but I put it away because we're not an ASMR channel. I thought it would be best to put it away. But
so do you wanna? Yeah.
So we watched Abbott Elementary season 1, episode 4, New Tech. Do you want to tell us what the episode's about?
Yes. So basically, the main plot of the episode is between a younger teacher, Janine, and an older teacher, Barbara, and how they adapt in the face of this new technology device that is being brought onto the school as this is it, guys. This is going to help our students read at a super, super top level. It's going to make everyone's lives easier, except that it was just here's a new tech. It's easy peasy. Just press some buttons. You'll figure it out. So it was hilarious. It was relatable. And yeah, I'm so happy that we chose it. And then there were some other additional plot lines to that about 2 teachers who were sharing. It was like a history lesson, right? About Philadelphia,
I think it's
a specific case, right?
Jacob, the male teacher, he says he's teaching about this event in Philadelphia's history. And then I don't think the other teacher actually has anything to do with his class. But she's oh yeah, that's my neighborhood. And I know the guys that were involved in that. It was basically some kind of union strike or maybe more than a strike. I forget exactly what it was. But apparently it was clashes between the police and a workers union.
And it was very recent, right? The people who were part of that were still very much alive.
Yeah, older, but alive. Yeah. And he's teaching it in a very sanitized way, I guess.
Vanilla.
Vanilla.
I mean, I think, he has this desire to be and there was this disagreement and then they talked and now there's no disagreement.
Yeah.
The
it's not
other
pistachio,
teacher was
it's definitely vanilla. Yeah.
And the other teacher was no, we had to break stuff,
Yeah, she says that's not what happened. And if you want, I can bring someone to your class who was there. She says the chief. So he assumes that it's the chief of police. And he says, oh yeah, please, I want to have the chief in my classroom. That would be great for the students. And she ends up bringing the chief of the strike. So who talks about the violence, the more, the pistachio version, or maybe that's not the best flavor to represent something that's a little bit edgy, but you know what I mean. The non-vanilla version.
Non-vanilla. Yeah.
The
non-vanilla
version. So, but maybe we can get into that one too, because to me that was really interesting in terms of thinking about culturally responsive teaching and how we teach, controversial or difficult subjects in the classroom. Because this is also an elementary school. So his students, I think he must be the 5th grade teacher, because that's a pretty deep subject for elementary school already. So, but what did you think about the new technology there? Like that whole situation, how they introduce it, how the teachers react to it, this kind of conflict between Janine and Barbara, and how Barbara like tries to fudge that she knows what to do.
It was hilarious. I think I even wrote about, like how I thought like she navigated that mistake. She took it till the end, because basically, and spoiler alert, right?
Oh yeah,
Barbara. Yeah. So Janine, who's like the younger teacher and super eager, and I think it's like her first year, or she's like newish to the school. She gets so excited, she gets super into it, and she's like, yes, technology, that's my jam, I can totally do it. And Barbara is like, I don't even know. And Janine gets really excited about the opportunity to help Barbara, right? And she goes and offers help in a not the best way possible. I thought it was like a little bit patronizing. And of course, Barbara, who is, I've been teaching kids how to read for like decades. I know what I can do. She's just like pushing buttons. But the way that she's pushing buttons makes the automatic scores seem like way, way higher than the average of the other teachers who are using the device. So in the end, the episode kind of like peak of the episode is when Barbara is asked to bring one of her students to show how good they can read, how well they can read. And that's when the whole facade, falls apart. But it was so hilarious, and she was so dignified, and I thought that was so funny. But it was also a reflection of how these like easy peasy explanations and just handing out a device just do not work for everybody. It's not just a good way to introduce new technology in a classroom, right? We've seen that.
I feel like they must have teachers on the writing staff of this show, because they get so much right about the conflicts and like the actual like challenges of the education system in ways that I don't think I see represented. And I don't watch Abbott Elementary. I think because of the reason of this like podcast that we have is that when I watch these types of series, I just I get into critical thinking about it. So it's not as enjoyable for me as just like watching something because it's funny, like watching Big Bang Theory or something, where I'm not like a physicist at a university. So I have no like understanding of what goes on. So, but after this episode, I thought, oh, maybe I could actually watch this and enjoy it, because it seems like the show knows what it's talking about in terms of the challenges of the schools, like of school systems as a whole, and like what's going on in our conversations about education. Because the way they introduce that whole conflict, they like dump this technology on the teachers. There's no training. The young teachers are like, yeah, something I can do. That, Janine's whole thing is that she's always asking questions, and this is her chance to know something that the other teachers don't know.
Yeah.
But then even she has a problem with it. And I think one of the things that came up for me was just how irrelevant this technology is to the problem it's trying to solve. And it made me think of, I think it's 2 years ago. I'm trying to remember which global education monitoring report this is. I think it's two years ago, 2 years ago. But one of the recent UNESCO global education monitoring reports on education and technology, the main thesis of that report is that there's not enough data to suggest that the technology that we're investing in is solving the problems it's intended to solve, that it's not necessarily a good monetary investment to put to purchasing technology to solve problems that can be solved in other non-technical ways. And, in this case, it's a computer program that's supposed to teach reading. Well, is the way we teach reading inefficient already? Does it need a technological solution? That's the whole question Barbara's trying to say, is that like, I know how to teach kids to read.
Yeah.
And I have been
just
teaching
not
kids
with
to
this
read.
program, right?
Yeah. And if we have already good methods for teaching students how to read, then why do we need to solve that problem with technology? What good is technology in the classroom? Well, students need to know how to use it for the future, right? So that's like the question I'm always asking is what is the lesson that the technology is teaching to the students? And is that the most efficient thing to use, because that's what we see so often in these cases, is that you dump a device like hardware or software onto a school, onto a teacher. You don't train them how to use it. It gets used for 5 minutes and then it gets put in a cupboard, or it just sits, takes up space on the hard drive, and teachers go back to doing what they know works, So, yeah.
I'm reading this book that talks about the case of MOOCs, for example. And they share these, like insights about
what's the
how it's called Failure to Disrupt.
Okay.
Which is, very, very interesting angle. And I'm really enjoying it. I can't remember the name of the author, but I don't have it near me. But something that he points out is that, when MOOCs were originally launched, they're like, this is going to revolutionize access to higher education, because it comes, like from higher education institutions originally. Everybody, by the year 2020, everybody's going to go be enrolling. Half of the people are not going to be enrolling in a university program in person. Everything's going to be online because of the MOOCs and la la la. And obviously that didn't happen, right? And something that the author highlights is how MOOCs didn't necessarily engage the population that they were originally thinking about for this revolution, because MOOCs, they realized that most of the MOOCs that they were analyzing the people who were enrolling there were people who already had some sort of undergrad education or some sort of, like educational level. And they had like a lot of intrinsic motivation, and they were enrolling in MOOCs not to gain a degree, but to maybe reinforce some knowledge that they had already acquired through an original degree, or that they just needed to level up. So they already had a job, or they were in the process of getting a job. So they were effective for specific types of population with specific types of problems, and also specific types of allowances, like access to internet, right? A computer,
Right.
or a good smartphone. And that question about, well, what is the problem that it's solving in this case wasn't very well defined, right? It was just like, give it to all of the kids and the technology will figure out how to best adapt to each kid. But there wasn't any training or a space to talk about, well, what you just said, how are our current methods working alongside this technology can actually help us to get to the next level? Because actually the baseline was not even mentioned, right? Was this a school where kids were having issues to read? And then the thing that caught my attention as well around that is how the use of technology, the successful implementation of this technology could lead to more funding for the school. And so the school authorities were very, very invested in this working, right?
Because they thought it would improve test scores, right?
Yeah, it would improve test scores, and then it would bring more funding to the school. And that is a very real issue, right? Limits in the educational budgets.
Yeah.
It's hard to just make a case for investing in education without showing this kind of like test scores as like a result, like this is good quality education.
It makes me think, this is kind of like a side note, but it made me think of a conversation I had with my mom recently when I was talking to her about our episode with Dead Poet Society and the paddle,
Oh my gosh, yes.
My mom was like, well, kids these days are out of control in the classroom. Like, maybe we need to bring back that kind of stuff. And I just was like, okay, first of all, the reason that kids are out of, like, quote unquote, I'm not sure that this is true. I'm not teaching in American classrooms right now, but like, I'm sure that the reason for whatever classroom management issues that are perceived is not because kids aren't getting beaten with paddles. And so then I had to, explain, first of all, when kids are scared, they can't learn. It shuts off those parts of the brain. So corporal punishment is not good for learning. It's maybe good for controlling people and getting them to do what you want. But then we're also teaching the kids that you solve problems with violence. Is that something that we want as part of the hidden curriculum of the school? And then if you think about, the challenges that we have, it's really to do with resources. The teachers don't have, the classrooms are too large. There's not enough staff. The staff have too much to do in the day. They're working over the amount of time that they're paid. And if you look at the percentage of the GDP that's dedicated towards education, it's lower. It's like, I think I looked, this is, don't quote me on this. This is not a real statistic, but I think that it's like something like this, that the amount of the GDP that the US invests in education is lower than, for example, like Kenya, which invests more of it. It has a lower GDP, but it invests more of its GDP in education than we do. And I don't know that that's like the exact country, but I was looking this up, and there were some countries that, Americans would be like, oh, that's a poor country, but they're actually investing more in their people than we're investing in our people. So anyway, those issues are really salient to I think the current situation of the education system. And I think it's across the board. This question of resourcing is not just a US issue. And the question of how do you invest responsibly in technology in the education system? It's so hard. Can you imagine being the person who has to make those decisions? And there's just not enough data to tell you what's working and what's not. And all of the ed tech companies, especially the for-profit ones, are going to try to sell you their products and tell you that they're amazing. Like, we have all this data that shows that it works, but that's going to be self-reporting. Like, the information is going to be, there's not a lot of like really neutral data out there on which types of technology work really well to enhance learning outcomes. Not that I've seen. There might be, someone can correct me on that if there is, but not that I've seen.
Yeah, I wonder if it's because there's so many moving parts, right, into integrating technology that meaningfully improves results in terms of like test scores, for example. If we take that as the proxy for what quality education is or should be, which that is arguable, but it's still right. Like, we need some sort of measure, because it's the training, it's the sustainability after you introduce the technology, right? In terms of like, are the equipments in solid using conditions? Is the software up to date? Do we have the internet connectivity that allows for smooth usage if needed? Is there training and peer support spaces for teachers to continue not only learning how to use it, but really taking ownership of the technology for their own purposes, because they are, the experts? Teachers are the experts. And then, is there follow-up to this, like, to compare a baseline before the introduction of the technology and periods after, and really understanding what are other factors that might be.
That's the thing, is there's so many other variables. Like, is that's, I guess, like, my question is this program a better investment than, say, hiring another teacher? Or
changing your methodology, right?
Exactly. Like, more professional development, or like making the administrative duties less so that teachers can spend more time on their lesson plans, or like, that's the question. Is the technology the solution? Is technology the most, the best solution, or is it just a thing that we're investing in because, like, it's a trend, or we think that it's going to do something, when we have it? Like, okay, if we've invested in all of those other things, and that's the comparison that we don't have, right? Like, are we investing in all of these other things and then technology on top of that? Because we're not solving the underlying issues before we're like putting a technological fix on things. So I thought the episode did really well. I mean, obviously this was like a 30-minute episode, and there's so much to talk about. I feel like we could do even a part 2 on this one. Because there's also like the relationships too between Janine and Barbara. Like, that was such an interesting, and I think very truthful dynamic of, how it is with like teacher relationships in the school.
Yeah, I thought that kind of like an underlying theme between, the dynamics between Janine and Barbara, but also the other two characters that, had the other main storyline, Jacob and Melissa, the one that we're teaching about South Philly history, was that peer, those peer interactions, and that kind of like desire for connection among peers. Because Janine was eager to show Barbara that she was also someone, like a teacher that it was worth spending time with, that, like, we can help each other. I want to be closer to you, right? And the same thing with Jacob when he invites Melissa to his class. He's like, oh yeah, let's do something together. And that is also something that I thought was very nicely portrayed, because as teachers, we get so much from these peer-to-peer interactions, these peer-to-peer collaborations.
Yeah. I thought that like, especially the interaction. So the interaction between Janine and Barbara, I thought was like really truthful, and something that comes up a lot when you study like school-based change, like managing school-based change. Because when I was in grad school studying education leadership, one of my professors was always like, you need to get the young ones on board at the beginning when you're trying to implement school-based change, and they'll be so enthusiastic that they'll like bring people along with them. But you see here that that's what they're trying to do. Like that's what Janine thinks she can do. But because of the way that everything's set up, she's not able to interact with Barbara in a way that's like saving face for everyone, if I guess is the way I would want to put it. Because Barbara also needs to have her dignity and like honoring her knowledge in the transition, you know, like she's been a teacher for so long. She's had successful results with her students. And now you're like, oh, you're doing it wrong. Do this new thing. And Janine's like, oh, I'm going to teach you how to do it. You know, so there needs to be some kind of facilitation where you're like honoring the old ways and letting the, you know, people who are enthusiastic about the new ways get others to be enthusiastic as well.
Yeah. And I think that Barbara's reluctance to tech, like in general, could be due to a lack of genuine structure support, right? Something that we saw, for example, happening in some trainings that we've put together, is that we've heard from trainers that they intentionally, for example, paired, when introducing these new technologies, they paired a younger teacher with an older teacher so that, you know, they could navigate alongside it. And something that I remember this trainer mentioning was that while the younger teacher had an easier time with technology and navigating, the internet in general, the older teacher, the more experienced teacher in the classroom had a better idea of how students could react to it and like classroom management in general. So pairing them up and working and having them work together.
Facilitating multi-directional learning instead of just making it kind of one-sided between the younger student to the older student.
Yeah, or one telling the other, like, you know, this is what's best for the children, or this is what the children need, which is a phrase that came up during the episode that I also, when it's used with such authority, it triggers me. Because like, wait, how do you know? How do you know that this is what they need, you know?
Yeah, same. Yeah. So I know we're like coming close to time, but I thought it would be a good idea to also touch on the other like side plot that was happening, because I found that so interesting. And it just really touched on, for me, like the culturally responsive teaching and learning that is like so often missing from our education systems. And it's being systematically removed in the US through, you know, this administration's policies around teaching things that they don't want people to know about. So I thought that
or turning them into vanilla versions, right? The way that like history is taught in South America or in colonized nations, for example.
Yeah. It's we can keep on this like ice cream metaphor. Vanilla education is, you know, is what we're delivering more and more, and it's getting even blander and blander. Like we're watering down the vanilla even when we really need to be adding like nuts and chocolate chunks and cherries and
and
all
it doesn't have to
gummy bears.
And just following that analogy, I guess there's this, it's, I don't know, tension or fear that if it's not vanilla, it's going to be ramen raisins, right? And these are kids. How can you give them ramen raisins? So it doesn't have to be, you know, one or the other. There has to be a tuning into the audience. So
I was just thinking, like, I really liked rum and raisin ice cream when I was a kid, but I don't think there's really rum in it.
I mean, you know, just to like mention something like that you wouldn't give to a kid, like get Bailey's ice cream. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you know, like there is this fear that, oh, if we don't water it down, or if we don't prevent the kids from learning about this, they're gonna learn something that their minds cannot process it, or this kind of crude information is not good for kids, which is also true. That is not the point. It's not that if we don't teach, you know, it's not either or.
Kids can learn hard things if it's facilitated well. You know, kids have to learn hard truths every day, and the problem is the adults not giving them any tools to navigate those hard things. And you know, we assume that parents will do it or communities will do it. And so it's not an official part of the curriculum. Like even social emotional learning is not really an official part of most curricula.
Yeah.
But it's something that those are the tools that actually we need to survive and to thrive into our old age, if we're lucky enough to get there, you know? So I thought that was, it was a really interesting dynamic, especially because the history teacher or Jacob, the teacher who's teaching these lessons, is very, I want to say, like insulting also about the really like lived experience of the other teacher and of her community.
Yeah.
And those kids are from that community. So how can he relate to them? How can he teach them if he views them in this like negative, he views their entire community in this like negative way because he's not from there. He's from like a more affluent part of town or whatever.
And he also mentions about how like, like I've studied this. This is something that I've learned about, that I've invested time into, like really trying to learn how to teach it, understanding how to teach it. So there's that tension as well, right? Versus the academic, let's say, experience and the lived experience.
And that's the thing, is that like what we get access to in books. I mean, this is also like my spiel about open educational resources and like why it's so important to be able to contribute and to let students contribute to knowledge production, because what we have access to is extremely limited, especially when you consider the perspective of things that are documented form. Like just for example, 1% of the internet is in Arabic. 1%. There's 1 billion Arabic speakers in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So what we have access to as English speakers is a vast amount more than like someone who's an Arabic speaker has access to online. Their knowledge isn't necessarily represented online. It's very one directional. Does that make sense? It's from the privileged to everyone else. And we're not getting we are not receiving the other information because it's not accessible. It's not written down. It's not translated. It's,
it's not included into the school curriculums, into educational policies, because I mean, and this also goes into the colonizing education system, right? Accepting that education systems are systems to maintain the status quo, that are in ways systems of oppression, that are heritage. No, how do you say? Legacy institutions from colonizing governments, from authoritarian governments, from a very, very squared way of trying to shape the world, right? And open education and decolonizing strategies are so important to power what you just mentioned.
And even South Philly needs decolonization. As like represented by this episode, which I thought was just so poignant and like so well done. And like it's not like they're beating you over the head with like critical theory, but they're representing critical theory in such an accessible way that I really loved it. It really stood out to me. And especially like how Jacob comes to like appreciate what the other teacher did for him. And for me, like Jacob, he can only be a good teacher to these students if he respects where they're from, and he respects the community that they come from and wants to understand it, not just from like a academic standpoint, but from the lived experiences of the students themselves and the families they come from, and the families lived through this event.
Yeah,
but he doesn't want to he doesn't ask any questions. He's not. I think that's the other, like, multi-directional learning, I think maybe is the key theme of this whole episode, because it's the learning between like Janine and Barbara. Also like the learning between Jacob and Melissa of, how do I improve myself through taking on someone else's like perspective and lived experience.
And everything that is being brought onto the students who are members of a community without that like exchange back, right? Which also what we're talking about, having a baseline before the incorporation of any technologies, right? Like, do we know where our students stand and what improvement or what better means for our particular community. So yeah, it was very funny. It was very rich, and like you said, like I think we could continue talking about this because I just keep remembering, like, oh man, this just reminds me of like what my grandpa used to say about how schools should start by teaching kids about their local history, about their super rich, histories of their super rich territories. And yeah, the first time I had like a tablet like that brought into the institution where I was teaching, and we had like very similar reactions. But yeah, but we need to wrap it up.
I know you've got a lunch date, so I won't keep you. But let's answer the key question. Is Janine Teagues a good teacher?
Yes, I think she is a good teacher. She has so much enthusiasm, passion, curiosity, and desire for connection with her peers and her students. Yeah, I think she's a good teacher.
Making mistakes doesn't make you not a good teacher.
Yeah.
So,
and she reflects, right? Like,
yeah,
the episode wraps around nicely into her realizing, like, oh man, I shouldn't have approached it this way. Like, I can find a different way to connect with Barbara. And maybe I was a little patronizing.
Yeah, I thought everyone, like all of the teachers, did a really good job on reflecting on themselves. And I think especially Janine knows that where she has weaknesses and is like really trying to work on them. So I agree with you. I think Janine Teagues is a good teacher, and I think maybe we need to like include an episode from Abbott Elementary in a future season. Like if ever we're doing like too many downers in a row, like we had this time,
this can be our go-to happy
palate cleanser. It's the sorbet,
for sure.
Out of the ice creams. All right. Well, thanks, Melissa, for watching this show with me. We did skip off Al-Rawabi School for Girls because we needed a break from the heavy stuff, and that one was really heavy.
It was so heavy. Yeah.
And we also want to maybe bring on some of our friends who have worked in the types of school in Jordan, and also someone from Jordan to weigh in because it's such a touchy subject. And I feel like I've lived in Jordan. I didn't work in that type of situation, so I don't necessarily feel like I will know if it's realistic or not.
Yeah,
but I have a friend who worked in a fancy private school in Amman. She actually taught one of the princes. Yeah,
royal
so we'll
families.
see if we can get her. We'll see if we can get her on. I'm trying to convince her.
Cool.
So we'll do that one, and that will be our last episode of the season of content, of reviews, and then we'll do a wrap up, and that will be season 2. So keep tuning in. We've got one more episode coming your way. Like and subscribe.
And send us recommendations of more media to watch.
Send us recommendations. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, if you can give us a 5-star rating, if we said anything that you liked today, or that you thought was interesting, or, we're working on improving some of the production, so please don't dock us any stars for that. All right. Thanks, Melissa. Cool. Enjoy your lunch.
Thank you, Nichole. Enjoy your day. Bye.
Bye.